Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, AVOWED. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino, and thank you guys so much for joining me on another episode as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity and AVOWED. As always, for those wondering why we pair those games together, it's because they share the same fantasy setting known as Eora. And so we're going to dive into Pillars of Eternity in the hopes that we can all gain an equal knowledge base as we move into the game of AVOWED as it undergoes development and eventual release. Today's episode comes by popular demand. Yes, that's right. There has been a numerous amount of requests for this topic over the course of, I would say, several weeks, but it's been kind of ramping up in recent days. I have a personal friend who played a game with this class that we're talking about today, and a couple of emails in recent weeks that have been specifically asking to do an episode on this. And so by popular demand today, we are going to be talking about one of the paladin orders of the World of Eora, known as the Bleak Walkers.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
For those of you who need a quick refresher on what it is that we're going to be talking about, if you want to know any more about paladins in the World of Eora, you can check out my episode on paladins. I do have one where I talk about all the different orders and how paladins work in Eora and what a paladin is. But as a quick refresher for those who want to just listen to this episode and move on, a paladin is essentially kind of like, whenever you play other fantasy role-playing games, they're usually the holy warrior. They're usually the person who is in plate armor from head to toe, he's sword and shield, he has divine power, he can lay his hands on someone and they can heal them with it, and they always smite evil and that kind of thing. That's the archetypal paladin that we are used to from fantasy RPGs. In Eora, a paladin is described as a martial zealot devoted to a god, ruler, or even just a way of life. They can be found in any culture where a fanatical group of like-minded individuals have formed a warrior society dedicated to advancing their cause. Essentially, a paladin in the Pillars of Eternity games, and therefore AVOWED, is someone who is devoted to a way of life, either by their devotion to a god, a faith, or just a philosophy. For example, the Darkosi Paladini are essentially just the royal guard for the most elite family in the Grand Valian society. And so a paladin order can essentially just be any group of martial zealots. And today, we're going to be talking about a evil group of the paladin orders, if you want to call them evil. You know, yeah, actually they are evil. They do a lot of evil stuff, but they might not have the most evil intentions that you think of. When you play the game of Pillars of Eternity and you want to select a Bleak Walker as your class for your character, the game has this to say as just a quick blurb about what you're about to get into. Dreaded for their mercilessness and cruelty, paladins of the Bleak Walkers believe that extreme brutality in warfare brings conflict to a swift close. To maintain their reputation for unrelenting savagery, the Bleak Walkers never give quarter and never abandon the field, even if their employers command them to. And when you play through the game as a Bleak Walker, you are expected to pick aggressive and cruel actions, and you are expected to not choose diplomatic or benevolent actions. So that's what you're getting into when you select a Bleak Walker. A Bleak Walker character is very good for those who really want to lean full on into the evil character. Although, as we'll see as we dive into the background for where this order came from, they're not just evil for the sake of being evil. They're not just these evil knights in armor that are walking around slaying everybody left, right, and center. They have reasons for why they do what they do. And they have a philosophy and a way of life that they want to live by. But do not get me wrong. These guys are known for doing very horrible things. And that's why people hire them. And that's essentially what the Bleak Walkers are. They essentially are a mercenary group. But they're not the kind of mercenary group that's out there to just make some gold and move on. They're a kind of mercenary group that is used for a specific purpose of ending conflict before it actually arises. As one of the developers in Obsidian, or at least someone close to the game put it, the Bleak Walkers are essentially a gun that you have to be willing to point something at and pull the trigger on. Because once you do, there's really nothing that can be done about it. As it says in the description for a Bleak Walker, even their employers cannot convince them to leave the battleground once they have made the commitment. So this is an overview of what a Bleak Walker is that we've been talking about so far. If you were to become a Bleak Walker yourself, the philosophy you have to live by is about the idea behind Bleak War that you have to live by. And so this information can actually be found on Josh Sawyer's Twitter page. He's been working on a tabletop role-playing game for Pillars of Eternity for a very long time. I don't know if he's going to finish it. I'm not sure. I don't know what the plan is there. There's been no updates in terms of like an official timeline, but he plinks away at every now and then. As well, you can also get the alpha version of the tabletop role-playing game as it currently is on the Obsidian website. If you want to check that out, it's completely free. But as Josh Sawyer was updating a lot of the stuff, he put out some images a while ago on the Bleak Walker Paladins. And the Bleak Walker mission and philosophy can be summarized as follows. To be a Bleak Walker is to be a living embodiment of Bleak War, which is purposeful violence without concern for morality or ethics. And that statement right there is very important. Purposeful violence without concern for morality or ethics. The idea behind that is that purposeful violence, so you're doing violent things, but with a purpose. It's not just wanton, it's not just as you feel. There's a reason why you are going to be violent, which means Bleak Walkers are skilled at being violent because they take it seriously. They look at violence as a tool to do what they think needs to be done, and they do so without concern for morality or ethics, which means wherever they are pointed towards, they will destroy whatever it is they're pointed towards, as we will learn about later when we talk about the Battle of Rakhan Mur. To be a Bleak Walker is to be loyal to the philosophy of Bleak War before any king, tribe, or nation. And this is in line with what we read about the official blurb for what a Bleak Walker is, that once they are unleashed on the battlefield, there is nothing that will stop them. Not even the person who hired them for the job in the first place can tell them to stop doing what they're doing, because they are loyal to the philosophy of Bleak War. And the idea behind Bleak War, again, is purposeful violence without concern for morality or ethics. Quite often, Bleak Walkers will be hired by someone to destroy an uprising before it gets too large, so that there's no rebellion, there's no war, there's not a lot of lives lost. Now, as you might be able to guess, sometimes, and probably most often, this means that the Bleak Walkers are being hired by the nobility, because they're the ones that can afford this. But I mean, theoretically speaking, a peasant uprising, if they wanted to hire the Bleak Walkers, they probably could. To be a Bleak Walker is to be a wolf of war, once loosed, neither requesting nor giving quarter under any circumstances, even when commanded to do so. And this is a very important aspect of what it means to be a Bleak Walker. And if you're going to roleplay as one in the game, or if you're going to roleplay as one in a tabletop role-playing game, that's something that you need to stick to. You are not allowed to relent. You're not allowed to give anyone quarter, and neither are you allowed to request any. You march on, you do your job, and you do not stop, even if it kills you. To be a Bleak Walker is to terrify by appearance, word and deed, and in doing so make the Bleak Walkers synonymous with Bleak War. This is one of the tactics, actually, that Bleak Walkers tend to use, is that they have made a reputation for themselves, and they are so well known for their skillful execution of violence within the battlefield that even just knowing that a Bleak Walker is on their way is enough sometimes to quell the battle already. People just turn tail and run. And so really a lot of battles can be won without actually having to do anything. To be a Bleak Walker is to give your life to the cause of Bleak War and in death to become a Black Saint. We don't have any more elaboration on what a Black Saint is. My guessing is that basically is if you die, then your name is hallowed among the halls of Black Saints. But you basically become a Black Saint by dying. Whether that means your soul turns into some sort of spiritual entity like a ghost or something along those lines, I don't actually know. Or if it's just something that is ritualistic or symbolic, that your name is considered a Black Saint. To be a Bleak Walker means to remember the acts of the Black Saints and invoke them in battle. And so it seems here like actually there might be some instance in which your soul, because this is possible within this world, that your soul could become that of a Black Saint, or it gets tied towards the Black Saints. Again, we're not really sure how it works, but that you can be invoked during battle. Whether or not this is actually invoking your soul's energy, or whether or not that people are just invoking your name as a Black Saint as a way to boost morale, it doesn't say here. But the idea behind it being that those who fall in battle become Black Saints, and then we remember the acts of these Black Saints, invoke them in battle, and that just all the more bolsters the resolve of a Bleak Walker paladin. And lastly, above all, to be a Bleak Walker means to stop battles before they begin, to stop wars before they can claim more lives. And that in right there is the main thrust of what it means to be a Bleak Walker. It means to stop wars before they happen, by basically having a small one where you decimate the enemy. This is what it means to be a Bleak Walker. And so if you're going to play Pillars of Eternity 1 or 2, or as I said, tabletop role-playing game, even if it's a D&D 5e, or if you're playing the alpha version of the Pillars of Eternity tabletop game, this is the character that you're going to be with. This is the kind of character that you need to run as. You need to be aggressive and cruel. You're not allowed to be benevolent or diplomatic, and you have to walk unrelentingly into whatever it is you are hired to do, and you are not allowed to give quarter or request it. The idea being that you want to end conflict before it escalates to further conflict. That's the idea behind that kind of character. So good luck playing that. I have talked to some friends of mine and fellow content creators, Sir Remoran, who is on the AVOWED cast with me quite a lot. He recently played a Bleak Walker, and he loved the roleplay. He had some pretty difficult times because he did do some things such as sacrifice a companion or whatever in ways that he did not enjoy doing, but he knew it was vital for the roleplay. And I also received requests from some people through email that they wanted to talk about Bleak Walkers because they thought they're absolutely badass. And they are badass. They're also the most messed up, let's be real. The history of the Bleak Walkers has to do with a man named Mantlock, which is Mantloc. And all of this information comes again from Josh Sawyer's Twitter page. And so this isn't something that I think everyone at Obsidian has made together, although it's possible. Perhaps he's just putting it all together and he has it on his Twitter page. But this is where we get this information of. All of this information, by the way, you can also read on the Pillars of Eternity fandom website for Bleak Walkers. The founder of the Bleak Walkers was an Ishadamil philosopher general named Mantlock, who believed that moral and ethical considerations in war were antithetical to the purpose of war, the imposition of control through violence. And so you can see here that the philosophy of Bleak War is starting and pretty much being moved by just this one person, Mantlock. And he has this very philosophical view of war, that war has a purpose, and that purpose is to impose control through violence. And so if you're going to do war well, you got to just lean into it. Don't hide behind the pleasantries of this or that or whatever. Just, own the fact that this is what you're doing. It was his belief that military codes of conduct and the consideration of civilian social mores in the pursuance of war prolonged suffering rather than abbreviating it. So his idea basically that everyone's trying to follow these rules of war and not commit war crimes is actually just making war last longer, and it's causing and wreaking more havoc amongst the people who are actually having to fight this war. He proposed an alternate military philosophy called Bleak War, which maximized the brutality and cruelty of war at both strategic and tactical levels. Though he was rebuked for his opinions, Mantlock practiced Bleak War with his armies during the Hiroko Peninsula War from 2574 to 2575. I don't know anything else about this particular war. What started as the rapid conquest of Ishadamil territory by Rauataian armies eventually turned into horrific massacres and the eventual rout of the civilian support staff that Rauatai had settled on the peninsula. So it sounds like this guy is extremely successful on the battlefield, but that's because he's not willing to play by the rules that people have for war. And you might think, war? There are no rules in war. And I mean, sure, technically, there's no rules in war, but there are some things that a lot of nations will adhere to. For instance, a lot of nations will agree, like, no harming civilians, no, like, targeting civilian areas or something like that. And it doesn't make sense to have rules for war, but you'd be surprised. A lot of military groups will actually abide by these codes because they agree that that doesn't serve the purpose of the war. However, Mantlock disagrees. He thinks that this actually prolongs the war, and he thinks the best thing you can do is fight as hard as you can and break every rule that you need to in order to win, and then be done with it. And so this is what he practiced, and it seemed to be very successful in terms of victories. Mantlock focused heavy on attacking Rauataian food stores, supply ships, farms, and civilian settlements, including all children they came across. And see, right there, if you're familiar with laws regarding war, which I'm not, but I have a cursory knowledge on them, That breaks a lot of the kind of accepted codes for what you should and shouldn't do in war. There's things that are considered unethical, even in a wartime scenario. But this guy's like, no, you're at war with someone. You're not here playing safe. You're trying to win. And so if you have to destroy their food, the supply ships, farms, kill civilians, even children, then that's what you do. Manalok's armies made a point of slaughtering every Rautain that surrendered to them and fighting to the death in hopeless conflicts. So you don't have any really hope when it comes to the Bleak Walkers. If you see them on the battlefield, don't think you're going to talk them out of it. Don't think you can surrender and be okay. Like, it is now a fight to the death, so you better hope that you just get lucky or you're very skilled. This brutality impressed on the Rautaians that Mantalok's way of waging war was not like theirs, and certainly not like the other Shadowmal armies they had faced. Within 6 months, the tide of war had changed, as had opinion on Bleak War in Shadowmal. Despite this, Mantalok came to believe that his philosophy could not be the method of operation for an entire nation's armies. So that's interesting. Mantalok, while he believed that this is the best way to do war, he didn't think that this is a way that an entire nation could do war. This was in part because he came to see how Bleak War transformed the individuals that perpetrated it, setting them apart from civilized society and unable to reintegrate. Instead, he came to believe the idea of an independent military force that embodied Bleak War as a way of life and death, continually traveling from conflict to conflict until battle claimed them. Interesting. So the idea behind this is that you can't just have the entire army of your nation be Bleak Walkers, because it will destroy them as individuals, and then they'll never be able to re-enter society. They won't be able to serve society in that way. So there's a whole large group of people that you have just basically turned into people that can't be civilians. But you can still give them purpose. You can still give them a life to live out if you can break them down and rebuild them, I would imagine, because that's what they like to do in the armies, I'm told. Basically turn them into Bleak Walkers as a way of life. Make this the way that they live. They move from conflict to conflict, doing what they do best, having purpose, having community with fellow Bleak Walkers, having a reason to do what they do, until one day battle claims them. And so that's the idea that Mantalok is running with here. This was the true foundation of the Bleak Walkers as a distinct military order. Over the following centuries, Mantalok's philosophers of Bleak War have reached every corner of the known world, where they are hired as mercenaries, assassins, and elite bodyguards. Although Bleak Walkers are not sadists as a rule, the order often attracts malcontents or those who have effectively given up on society. So that's something to note as well, because you might be tempted, if you're going to roleplay this character, to be a sadist, someone who just loves inflicting pain or experiencing pain, but it's not a rule that you have to be that way. Of course, I'm sure a lot of Bleak Walkers are, but you don't have to be. You could just be all in on the philosophy that I want to end conflict before more arises. Veteran Bleak Walkers are often deeply traumatized by their actions and use a variety of coping mechanisms to deal with that trauma. Of all the well-known Paladinors, the Bleak Walkers have a grim reputation for taking their own lives in times of peace or seeking death on the battlefield. Bleak Walkers who die in battle or by their own hand are venerated as Black Saints, their names chiseled into slabs of black marble and enshrined at the Mother House in Chishwa, which is, I'm guessing, a city in Shadowmal. And so this kind of tells you a little bit about the individuals in the Bleak Walker Paladin order. When it comes to times of peace, they don't really have purpose anymore. They have nothing that they have to do, and they have all this trauma for the things they've committed, and a lot of them can't live with it, it sounds like, and they take their own life, or they find ways to seek battle and get their life taken for them. It's a pretty bleak existence, no pun intended, for a Bleak Walker. And I imagine this Black Saints thing was invented by, I would say, the veterans or whoever's in charge. I feel like this was something that was invented by them as a way of keeping morale high enough that they didn't take their own lives, or that they would seek death in battle rather than taking their own lives. Because I don't think that they are trying to convince them that Black Saints are really a thing. It's probably just a ritual or method that goes along with this way of life, because they're trying to make this an actual way to live, rather than just a thing that they kind of do on the side. This is their life. This is their whole purpose. This is what they have to dedicate everything towards. And so in that sense, the Black Saints are real. Although the Order's individual chapters enjoy a fair amount of autonomy, the Mother House maintains authority over the branches and their individual members. Notable chapter houses stand in Pincenze of Old Valia, Yarma in Adir, New Heamar in the Deerwood, and Ozaya in Valian Republics. And so these are some notable headquarters for Bleak Walker paladins. The main one being in Shishwa, which is a city again in Ishadamil. We've been talking a lot about these different factions and nations, and some of you may not be familiar with all of them. As I say these names, just think of them as random nations. There's episodes already out that talk about a lot of this stuff, so we can go listen to those if you want to know more about them. And so this is what it means to be a Bleak Walker. This is the history of where it comes from with this philosopher general from Ishadamil known as Mantelok. The more and more I read about the nation of Ishadamil, the more I want to get into it. And it's a shame we don't know more about it, and I'm hoping that AVOWED is going to give us some more content and some more lore in that area. As I dive into the Bleak Walkers, I gotta say, you guys that emailed me, you're right. Like, this stuff is really interesting, and this is a very well thought out group to roleplay as, and this is a very interesting paladin order to be a part of. I feel like it's trying to answer the question of how can we make a paladin, but who is evil? Because usually paladins are lawful good characters in a party for an RPG, but the Bleak Walkers here are clearly, well, they're probably lawful neutral if you're going with morality alignment, which I know a lot of people don't like, but whatever. It's an easy way of conveying information, so I'm going to use it. They might even be lawful evil, depending on how you want to describe this kind of stuff, but it's an interesting take on the evil paladin side of things. Before we close off today's episode, I just want to talk about one notable battle that the mercenaries of Bleak Walkers were in, and this is called the Battle of Rakan Moor. The mercenary paladins infamously put down a fledgling peasant revolt on behalf of the local lords. So here we have the introduction. Mercenary paladins infamously put down. This is the Bleak Walkers, obviously. So the Bleak Walkers were hired by local lords to put down a fledgling peasant revolt. This has all the telltale signs of Bleak Walker missions. Hired by someone, and regardless of ethics or morality, they put down the revolt, which is just a fledgling peasant revolt, so it hasn't even reached anything yet. But they're putting it down before it becomes anything bigger. The dissidents had taken refuge in the moor in hopes that unstable ground and acidic peat bogs would discourage pursuit. Undeterred, the Bleak Walkers marched on the peasants' campsite, shoulder to shoulder, shields locked. Many of them sank into the fuming fen, dying with little protest. The terrified rebels watched in horror as the grim paladins who survived the deadly march accelerated into a final charge, breaking through the upstarts' thin ranks before butchering them all. And so if you need a story to keep in your head in order to maintain the roleplay of a Bleak Walker character for the game or for a tabletop game, this is the one to stick with. There's a bunch of peasants, they're just poor peasants trying to revolt against the lords. I don't know who's the right and wrong of the situation, we don't know. But either way, Bleak Walkers were hired by the lords to put down the peasants, so that's what they're going to do. Peasants are taking refuge in a very dangerous area. And it says here the Bleak Walkers marched through this dangerous area, this bog, I guess, and the acidity in there, a whole bunch of them just died, but they didn't even complain about it. They just were marching side by side. Some of them sank and drowned, I'm assuming, or whatever it is. Many of them just died, and they didn't even complain about it. That's just how it goes. The rest of them, they kept marching on, and eventually they went through the dangerous area to where these peasants were camped out, and they slaughtered all of them. They didn't spare a single person. And that, my friends, is a Bleak Walker paladin at work.
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
And so the question that might come to mind now, obviously, is what about Bleak Walkers in AVOWED? What are we going to see there? The obvious answer is that either A, you can be a Bleak Walker, or B, you will run into them. So in the first instance, if we have character creation, or if at any point during the story we have the opportunity to join the Bleak Walkers, there's a chance that you as the player character can be a Bleak Walker. And I'm interested to see how that would play out if something like that is included in AVOWED, because being a Bleak Walker is more than just, a cosmetic thing. You get to wear armor that's black, and you get a special weapon and armor with it. It's gonna be, or at least it should be, more than that. It should be a way of living, which means you're gonna have to roleplay your character. It means that you're gonna have to do things in the game of AVOWED that align with the Bleak Walker philosophy of life and war. And if you don't do that, then I don't know. How do they get rid of Bleak Walkers? Do they send more Bleak Walkers after you to get rid of you, to oust you from their ranks, or do they strip you of a title? We don't know. It doesn't say. Point being, If you're going to be a Bleak Walker in Avowed, or in any of the Pillars games, there should be an element of roleplay to it. Obviously not so serious that it ruins the gameplay, but serious enough that it impacts the actual game. This does happen in Pillars of Eternity. If you roleplay the character in a benevolent or diplomatic way, your paladin abilities are less powerful than if you had chosen aggressive or cruel actions. Not enough to break the game, but enough that you might feel it or notice it. And so that's one way that we could be Bleak Walkers in Avowed. You pick it at character creation, or through the story, you're actually able to join their ranks or join in with them, which I imagine will have consequences on the story and also things that your character has access to. The second way is that you might interact with NPCs who are Bleak Walkers. Now, this could have a lot of implications. For example, perhaps you have Bleak Walkers sent against you, which means that, like, if you're playing a character who's like a silver tongue kind of character who can talk anyone out of battle, this is a situation where maybe you can't do that. These might be the kind of NPCs and enemies where you cannot talk them down. They are going to go down with you dying or them dying. So there might be that reality that you have Bleak Walkers sent against you, and maybe a rebellion that you're a part of, if that's part of the narrative of the game. That's all realistic. Or they might just be NPCs that you interact with. Like, they might be doing their own thing and you happen to be a bystander, or you might happen to meet them at a tavern somewhere when they're on the way to another place, and that might lead to a quest. Who knows? So we can interact with Bleak Walkers, which personally I would find very interesting. Those would be NPCs that I follow through the game to see whether or not Obsidian programs them to doing something. And so, yeah, that's Bleak Walkers, and those are how I imagine that we could see them in Avowed. Thanks, everyone, for listening to today's episode. This was supposed to just be a short, quick one, and it ended up being a full-length episode, so I'm kind of happy about that. I hope for those of you out there who are interested in hearing about Bleak Walkers that this scratched that itch that you wanted. I know that I got way deeper into this than I thought I possibly could, and I really enjoyed it. So thanks for making a suggestion, and just put that out there for all of you listening. If you have a suggestion on an episode you'd like, send me an email, because I do read that stuff. I know there's been a lot of requests for the character of Durance from Pillars of Eternity 1, so I might look at doing one of those pretty soon. I do have some other topics I'm wanting to hit already, so we'll see. But I do read these emails, so if you guys have requests, let me know. It was very fun doing this one. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns that you want to air to me, you can send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter, and you can follow me there if you want information about the show or updates on episodes. You can follow me on Twitter @worldofeora. That's everything for today. If you guys, again, if you have any questions or requests or pointing out any mistakes I might have made in today's episode, or whether or not you liked it or didn't like it, and just, send an email. I love having this kind of conversations. I'm a gamer just like you guys, and I dig this kind of stuff. So with that said, everyone, thank you for listening to today's episode about the Bleak Walker Paladins in the World of Eora. Hopefully we'll see them in Avowed, or hopefully not, depending on, how you want to roleplay your character or not get killed by. So thanks for joining me. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.